So yeah, we have to be extremely careful, and there needs to be AI literacy. I think before you let anyone with a mental health problem near a chatbot, you need to look them in the eye and say, it does not care about you. It's a machine. It's not real. It's code. But you can help yourself by actually venting to it. And one of the things I used to say to students when they were doing, when I was training them in techniques of psychotherapy, one of the real benefits of psychotherapy, in CBT especially, you have a thought and you make the person get the thought out. And maybe sometimes you make them write it out. And I say, what it helps you do, is really honest, often what it helps us realize is how stupid some things that are in our head sound when we put them into the world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Intelligent Future podcast. In today's episode, I chatted with Professor Justin Thomas, who is a senior researcher at King Abdulaziz Center for World Culture, also known as ITHRA. I chatted with Professor Justin about an increasingly important topic in our society, which is the rise of AI chatbots that are used for mental health care. These chatbots have a lot of use cases. One of them is to provide companionship, but also to improve conditions such as depression and anxiety. But the question is, do these chatbots really care about our feelings? Are they really interested in improving our well-being, or are they programmed to simulate such emotions and such feelings? If they do not care about our emotions and our feelings, then how can the individual still benefit from such solutions? Also, should this be our first line solution if we have mental health issues? Or should we instead seek support from family, human therapists, the community? And also, can chatbots be our real companions? Can they be real friends that we can rely on? Or is that actually a delusion? I chatted with Professor Justin Thomas about all these questions and all these topics and more. And the conversation went in many interesting directions. It was one of the episodes that I enjoyed the most. And I hope that you will really enjoy it. So without further ado, I leave you with the podcast, and I hope that you will enjoy watching. Justin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. How are you?
Doing great. I'm very happy to have you today.
Yeah.
All right.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for
Great.
a really interesting topic.
Absolutely. Justin, for the audience, how did you get interested in psychology?
That's a huge question. Yeah, I think like I've been thinking about really trying to think about the roots, the real roots, but I think there's probably several influences. I think that undoubtedly the biggest influence for me was my mother. So my mum, she was, even before she went to university, she was a huge fan of a psychologist. Fan is the wrong word. A huge reader, an erudite reader of Carl Gustav Jung. So he's one of Freud's proteges. So he's kind of one of the seminal psychologists of the kind of 19th, 20th century. And she was an avid reader of all his works. So the bookshelf in my house was stacked full of the works of this eminent psychologist. So this is as a young child. And then I remember she went to university to study philosophy, and she was torn between philosophy and psychology. And so she did, I think, psychology as a minor or as her first year subject. So in my house around that time appeared lots and lots of general psychology textbooks alongside philosophy textbooks. And I always remember I have had this thought when I was kind of, I think maybe I was about 7 or 8. So I'm really quite young. I can
Oh,
read,
wow.
but I can't read those books.
Of course.
I can have a go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember, like, I always remember going to the shelf and thinking I'm going to read a big book. And the philosophy books didn't interest me as much as the psychology books, because the psychology books all had pictures and cool titles. Like there was one called The Social Animal. I always remember it. That was the one, that big chunky font as well. Big chunky font and pictures, so it felt more like accessible. But I'm sure that influenced me, you know, so this is early on. I'm sure that influenced my choice of major later on. Another thing I remember was being in my local library, so Lodge Lane Library, Liverpool. I think I was about like maybe as a teenager, and I remember looking for a book, like any book, like I just wanted a book like that interested me, that you kind of browse the shelf and think, speak to me. And there was a little book, because I'm not a big reader. But even though I'm talking a lot about books, like I like little books with big font, things that are easy to read. Did then, do now. Um, and this book jumped out the shelf because it had the word psychology, and it was small. It was really small, and it was yellow, so it stood out. Had the word psychology in it, and it was a book that really is been really influential. I think in nudging me towards psychology. But it was called "The Dilemma of a Muslim Psychologist" by someone called Malik Badri, who I later met many years later. I met him
Oh,
in the
wow.
UAE.
Amazing.
But he's a hugely influential psychologist in the sphere of Islamic psychology. There's a whole discipline now that's emerging, Islamic psychology, and you can kind of see him as the kind of if you like, the renewer of that interest, like that interest in a kind of psychology that interfaces or grows out of an Islamic worldview. So I think there's some of the influences. And I think the other stuff as well, like I think a lot of people that get interested in psychology are interested in it if you're interested in, you being a better version of yourself. So I remember I used to find it really, really difficult to talk to people. I would say I was pathologically shy. So shy is good. Yeah, shy is good. But I was like excessively shy to the extent that that's not helpful. Do you know what I mean? And
As
it
a
was
child, not as a teenager, or as a teenager as
as a
well.
child and as a teenager, and as a teenager. And so I guess my own individual personal struggles with not being how I wanted to be, kind of
Okay, so
wanting to
from a
shape myself.
self-improvement perspective. Okay.
Self-improvement, self-development, can I fix this broken being and kind of nudge him closer
Oh, that's
towards the
beautiful.
being I want him to be? That kind of thing, maybe not quite so narcissistically framed, but definitely that was part of it. If I'm honest, I think that was part of it. And I think if I dig really deep, I think these false ideas that quickly were dismissed, but this idea that psychology would give you some kind of like magical superpowers over other people. I think there's some people who are still into that, like this NLP, neuro linguistic programming, how to influence people and get them to do what you want them to do.
Yes.
I mean, but I think at one point in my life, I thought like, oh, that would be useful. That would be a good superpower to have. But I think there's a thin line between that sort of stuff and kind of psychopathy and Machiavellianism, kind of manipulative. So that fell away quite quickly, and I think the more positive intentions came to the fore, and I thoroughly enjoyed it as an undergraduate. I studied psychology, but to the point of this podcast as well, I did a double major. I was also fascinated by technology from a very young age. I begged my mum for a ZX Spectrum, which is one of the early home computers that you could kind of write code on. And I did want it for code. I wasn't one of those kids who wanted to play games. I did play a couple of games. Used to have to put a cassette in and wait for it to load. Didn't have that kind of patience.
Mhm.
But I used to buy these magazines which would teach you how to code, to make your own games.
Beautiful.
And then I would type in the code and then change stuff. You know,
Mhm.
so I got interested in computers really early on. So my major combined psychology and information technology was the major, um, and that was a sweet spot for me because I was really interested in both. I
Beautiful.
didn't want to let go of
How
that.
did both disciplines, information technology and psychology, affect your career later on? I mean, I'm assuming that you've worked in a clinic as a psychologist, but also as an academic, as a researcher.
Yeah, interesting question because I think one of the when I graduated, so I graduated with my degree in this combined honors IT psychology. My passion at that point was more in psychology. Like psychology was the thing I was just on fire about. To be honest, like I liked IT still,
Mhm.
and I saw that as a means to employment. It's like it was a safe bet.
Mhm.
But I remember as I went in my final year, one of my supervisors came to me and said, the external examiner from Hull really loved your dissertation, and he wants to offer you a PhD.
Mhm.
So like straight from undergraduate, they offered me to do PhD at Hull.
Mhm.
But the university also offered me a job as an analyst programmer to
Oh,
work
wow.
on the computer systems. So I was like, oh, do I go and do this PhD in psychology or do I take the cash? And I chose the cash because
You did.
working in the
Okay.
university, I chose the cash. But the university said to me, stay, do this, and any master's program, you can choose any master's you want, and you can do it here for free. So you get the best of both worlds. You continue your
Good.
education, and you get paid. So I was like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. And Hull didn't really appeal to me as a city.
Mhm.
So I decided to stay. And so I worked in IT. So IT became the day job, and I did a master's in psychology at that same university I was working at in the night time. So I kept both paths alive for a long time. And I worked in IT again after I left. This was also just after that was close to the Y2K
Mhm.
uh, catastrophe that never happened. I don't know if you remember that. You're possibly too young, but in the year 2000, planes were going to fall out of the sky. The world
Oh,
was
yeah,
going
yeah,
to
yeah,
end.
yeah. I think I do. I do. Yeah.
Yeah, the
I was
white
very young, but I still remember that. Yes, I do. Yeah.
yeah.
The
So the
2000
the
problem.
Y2K bug.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And at that time, like computer, anyone who could write a line of code was ultimately a superhero who was going to
Correct.
save the planet. And
Absolutely.
everybody wanted us.
Yeah.
So I went to work for the Bank of England for a ridiculous amount of money. In my mind, at that time, it was like, really, you're going to pay me that? Okay. So I went to work for the Bank of England on their Y2K fix. Um, and then after that, I went back. I stayed in IT because it was a lucrative and you were in demand. But I kept my psychology alive because I registered for a part-time PhD. I was invited by the University of Manchester. It was a bursary to do part-time PhD in psychology. So that was my lifeline to keeping the connection alive with psychology because I still like IT. I still like programming. I use it in my own research.
Wonderful.
But I came to the conclusion that working in IT after a while, it wasn't for me. When I was being forced to work on projects that I really didn't feel a strong passion for,
Mhm.
connection to, and I kind of was having to use languages and tools that weren't interesting to me, it started to become a little stale, became a job.
Yes.
So it was nice to have the psychology to fall back on, to escape to. So that was kind of my early
Yeah,
career path.
I kind of agree with you about IT. Now, I'm come from an IT's background, and then later on, I got interested in psychology. Not both at the same time, like yourself, but as I got older, I realized that focusing too much on programming or software development becomes a bit tiring as you get older because you have to keep up with all these new frameworks, like for instance, one programming language, JavaScript, there are, I don't know, like hundreds of frameworks. How can you keep up with that? In reality, they don't. Developers, they just pick a few that they're really good at, but still, I mean, that pressure that you have to keep up with all these, for me, got me, and I decided to keep my programming skills, but not get into all these details and focus more on psychology and research, the intersection between psychology and IT and technology.
Yeah, I think very, very wise, especially with the way things are moving now, with the ability for AI to generate code. And
Absolutely.
I think the markets as well, like in terms of pure coders and stuff, like kind of
Exactly.
there are people in other part, anyone from any part, other parts of the world. So it makes the model, that kind of the employment model, quite vulnerable. A
100%.
group of people somewhere and undercut, you, and they can do, because their cost of living is less. Then you're very vulnerable unless you're at the very top of the game. So yeah, I kind of intuited that early on. I think the first experience of that was when I went to work for the Bank of England, because I was really young. I was almost a fresh graduate, and I was working alongside guys who were like in their 50s, getting paid the same amount as them. Just because I was a fresh graduate, I knew some stuff, the latest languages that they didn't know,
Yeah.
and hadn't refreshed. So I
Yeah.
thought, yeah, you're always going to be vulnerable to that in that game, which is good, because I think if you stay at the top of your game, it encourages you to be a lifelong learner. So I
100%.
think it's a good
But
example
if
of
you like
people.
that, you have to like it though.
Yeah, yeah. You've got to love it. Yeah, you've got to love it. And I
Exactly.
fell in love with some basic languages and didn't want to leave them. Like, this works. Let me stay with this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Excellent. Okay, that's such a beautiful journey, and that takes me to the next segment of this podcast, which is the rise of AI that we all are witnessing, and it's rapidly evolving by the hour, by the day. So as a psychologist, but also as a technologist, how do you feel AI is reshaping the landscape of psychology? What are some of the pluses? What are some of the minuses?
Oh, I think that question's huge, and depending on what mood I'm in, I'll give a different answer. Because I think there's really, like, there's part of me that's really enthusiastic about it and thinks, wow, and yeah, we can definitely leverage this for social good, and there's so many benefits to be had. But then there's another voice inside me, but thinking, but this is Bani Adam. You know what? This is humanity. You know what they're going to do with
Uh-huh.
this.
Uh-huh.
But I think, I mean, I don't know. I spend a lot of time thinking about this. I think there's I'm not like a kind of a technological determinist. I don't think, like, kind of, we just have to roll over and
Mhm.
say, okay, it's here, we have to accept it. No, we have to shape it. We really have to be effortful in
Mhm.
kind of shaping how this thing unfolds. And if people are using it in ways that are unethical and problematic,
Mhm.
we need, like, our legislators need to get on that sooner rather than later. It's
Mhm.
coming. It's potentially a real force for good. There could also be some catastrophic consequences,
Mhm.
but it's down to us to be, not optimists, not pessimists, but kind of realists, and try and shape this in a way that is beneficial. And then I think you get into a big fight about what is beneficial, and again, this is again very kind of human
Mhm.
tendency. Like, we need to define, like, what's beneficial for me might be to make loads and loads of money. What's
Mhm.
beneficial for you might be to preserve the mental health of your children. So we
Mhm.
need to have a negotiation, and maybe, there's definitely some
Mhm.
negotiated middle ground that needs to be sought, I think, between the competing interests and vested interests in this space. But what an amazing time to be alive. I think it's similar to, and I'm not the first person to make this analogy, but this one works quite well, like the printing press. So when the printing press dropped, Like some people would have thought, oh wow, yeah, oh look, books have been around for ages, but you can make them better and quicker. Okay, great. But they didn't see the bigger picture. So 50 years after the printing press, you didn't just have more books in society, you had mass literacy, you had a movement towards education for all. You had what some people would say like a shift in terms of religious worldview. You had the Protestant Reformation. Then people would say you had the birth of individualism. You had a heliocentric universe. So this kind of, sometimes there are technologies that really shift humanity's axis, like, full 180. What do we call it? Punctuated equilibrium. It's a term that they use in evolution. This idea that those things aren't always slow, steady, and don't take long. Every now and again, something massive
like a
happens.
big bang or something, a storm or something like that. Yeah.
Almost like, yeah, and I feel like this generative AI is one of those moments. Like some of us are scratching our heads going, wow, that's cool. AI can write my CV. Wow, this is cool. AI can write my essay. No, it's much bigger than that. It's much, much bigger than that.
Okay, so let me challenge you on that, and then we'll get back to the benefits, because there are some thinkers like Noam Chomsky, for instance, who say that this generative AI is just it has been trained on, I don't know, thousands, millions of records, and then it just plagiarizes from these records, and whatever it produces, it's difficult to detect the plagiarism in there, but it has essentially plagiarized. There's nothing novel in there.
There's no creativity.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not inside the brain of this technology at all. But other people who I really respect who are in this field who've explained it to me, I think it's slightly more sophisticated than to call it just a big fat plagiarist. I think it's a little bit clever. But even if that is its modus operandi, it produces things that are in many cases better than average humans can produce. In many cases, not all cases, it produces these works. Well, let's just stay in the domain of a written piece. It can do this thing that we humans have prided ourselves on being the kind of the gatekeepers of. Only we can do that. It can do that to a certain extent. Like even that, for me, it's okay. So it's artificial stupidity. It's not artificial intelligence. It's as dumb as humans are. Let's just say if that's its cap. But even that is such a game changer. You will see that has so many profound implications for individuals, for society, for education, for the future of our cognitive abilities. I'm just kind of getting outside of the box of the little things it can do to the possible unintended consequences that can have. And that's just what I say is that we really need to be masters of this. We really need to engage with this proactively and think about the possible unintended consequences. Not roll over and think, oh, well, it's inevitable, but really think about ways in which we can manage that. How can we safeguard our critical thinking abilities and our abilities to be creative writers if a 13-year-old, before he's developed those skills, can now have a machine that does that for them? That some people will argue, well, we'll never get better than humans. But I guess the Chomsky position, it will never get better than humans on that because it's reliant upon human content. It will always be faster. It'll always be able to give us 10,000 versions, but it's kind of like its threshold or it's capped by its human inputs and then its own self-generated inputs. Like it doesn't go beyond that.
It doesn't. That's right. And it doesn't have like a hunch. Yeah.
And then you have the sci-fi people saying, soon it'll be conscious, and then it'll, I mean, I think that there's no evidence.
There's no evidence. Wonderful.
So I think that as a psychologist, these are some of the things I think about. If we stop developing those skills, is it almost like we hit pause? We're all getting excited, like, wow, this is progress, but are we in essence hitting pause on our progress if we do allow that to happen. Like for me, like AI tools that help me write are a fantastic tool, because every now and again they'll catch a slip, or they'll share with me a skill that other writers do that I don't do, and I evaluate it and think, actually, based on criteria, I'll think that's more parsimonious than my sentence. You've said the same thing in less words, you win, I'll accept that change. But 9 times out of 10, I tell AI, shut up. AI says, write it this way, you'll sound more confident. I'll say, be quiet. I don't want to sound confident. Yeah, this isn't a position. This is a position of nuance. We want to open the door to open-mindedness. So I'm in a position where I tell AI to be quiet because I've earned those skills. I've honed those skills over many years of writing, of having other humans critique my work, etc., etc. If future generations don't do that, or large masses of people don't do that, or don't see the need to do that, because they can get a perfectly okay piece of writing from the machine, that makes them sound confident even when they don't want to sound confident. That gives their default emotion as being thrilled. I'm thrilled. People don't use that word in everyday language, but it's everywhere in online posts.
Especially
So the
on
AI
LinkedIn.
will have its new, and the minute you can see it's a feedback loop. The minute it starts using it, other people who aren't using AI use it in real life, and that becomes part of its format that it feeds upon. And then we get these artificial kind of popular words like thrilled. The only time people use thrilled is at the Oscars. People don't use. I'm thrilled to announce our paper was accepted. Sorry, I'm mocking a little bit, but I think you can see these are some of the subtle influences.
I mean, it makes me absolutely. What we are saying, it makes me intrigued about the development of language in the future, because language is developed naturally by people's innovativeness and sometimes by people's laziness. Like they want to say something shortly in a shorter way. It would be interesting to see AI's influence on that. Now, okay, I want to switch gears a little bit and use your psychological expertise on generative AI in mental health, because this podcast is aimed at the general public. So let's say someone has an issue. Do you think it's a good idea for them to use like a supportive chatbot, like WISA, for instance, or like HeyPi for their mental health? Or do you feel no, that's not still experimental? They should go to a therapist or a psychologist instead. What's your feeling on that?
I think the first thing to say on that, and I will get into it, we'll answer the question, but I think the first thing is that we really need to take one step back and look at society. Like people say, oh, there's a massive rise in mental health. We need more therapists. We need chatbots. Oh, there's too many people with mental health problems. We need to look at why that might be. What is it in our societies that is giving rise to
that's causing that?
Yeah. So we can't be diverted from the bigger, kind of the societal ecosystem, the architecture within which these mental health problems emerge. We can't absolve ourselves of focusing on that by focusing on something little like training therapists, training people to fix the problem after it's already happened. So prevention, which is not to dismiss the question. There's definitely some, what do we do while we fix the roof? So we still need to help people who are in crisis, people who have, the real problems. I think we need to differentiate as well between the over pathologization of common human experiences. Like, some people, if you like, the threshold for sadness or feeling anxious, they're normal human emotions. And some people make money off pathologizing them, over pathologizing them. So I think we kind of have to also separate out the business models and then look at when there's real need for someone to have support. I think the really sharp end of the spectrum is like suicide. When people are suicidal, you know, the intervention is absolutely 100% required because we want to save a life. And I think so. If I start there at the very, very sharp end and look at things like chatbots, then definitely, if there's no one else to speak to, and this is the big if there's no one else to speak to, talk things through with, or the person feels so disempowered and so disconnected from the fellow humans that they can't reach out to these other people through stigma, whatever other reasons there might be, then a chatbot could potentially save someone's life. And I say potentially because we really need to see evidence of that. You know, I think we really need to look at that. Like, and there's also the possibility it could make things worse. I think we need to be open to that possibility too. So at the very sharp end of this, and it's not, for me, it would always be second best to a good human. But in the reality of our kind of, you know, our social setup, our kind of economies and our education systems, there's a finite number of people who can validly offer those skills and services in a way that's helpful. So yeah, how do we improve access to these therapies, especially for people who need them most? Out of hours, in crisis, is there a way? And I don't see the chatbot. I think for me, the vision of the chatbot isn't someone that's going to give advice and tell the person don't do it, tell the person, you know what I mean? The chatbot is, for me, similar to the therapist in many ways. It allows you to just what you're thinking in your head, to put it out there and have it maybe reflected back to you, with additional questions that you might not think of. I know because we've had this discussion before. A lot of chatbots just give us answers, but I think the really clever chatbots that blow me away are the ones that ask intelligent questions. I think I've always been brought up with, don't judge a person's intelligence by the answers they give, judge a person's intelligence by the questions they ask. And so I think that's where a really useful chatbot might be helpful for someone in a crisis state. And then if we, then in other states as well. I mean, I think I hesitate, and this is a very tentative view, but something better than nothing, or something that's been proved to not make things worse.
Wonderful.
Is better than nothing.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I sit.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think the psychologists could use these tools like AI chatbots, for instance, as a conjunction with the human therapy? Because obviously human therapists are not always available, and these tools can be always available. So if there is more need at a cheaper cost, these chatbots could fill that gap.
Yeah, I think they could be. I think the word I would use is the adjunctive. So alongside a therapist, ideal situation alongside a therapist, or I'd see a few roles for them. One could be, so you have this idea of stepped care. So, first there's this. So first you chat to the chatbot, tell some things, blah, blah, blah. And then there's like an idea of, okay, you go to the next stage. Like, so it's a stopgap. So you want an appointment, you've got to wait 3 weeks for the appointment, but this chatbot could do some active listening in the interim, which could then feed the therapist's formulation before they actually meet you. So that kind of helps you feel like you're in the process earlier, and also help the therapist in that they've got access to some a preliminary understanding about the client. So it's not a cold meeting the first time. If they meet online or face to face, they've already got some pre-stuff. And I think there's lots of scope, like in certain types of therapy, active therapies like CBT. You do things called they call it homework exercises, or out of session behavioral experiments, activities, thought challenging. These are all techniques within CBT and other frameworks that could definitely be supported by AI. I could easily imagine AI helping you do thought challenging. Although I would say it's probably better to do it yourself. Get the skill, have the skill yourself,
Yes.
But it would be useful to maybe have the skill, and then, when so you can thought challenge anytime, any place, anywhere, learn the skill, but then for maybe for thoroughness, or for the sense of surprise, like the AI might challenge the thought in a way you wouldn't challenge it yourself.
Yes.
Just for this kind of like an external challenge, and it's not a human, it doesn't care about you, it might make an absolute clanger of a mistake. I think that's really important, because the minute people start to feel that this thing actually has some feelings towards me, it has empathy for me, it understands me, it gets me, like, that's a delusion on your part. Like, it really doesn't.
No.
There's a famous case, isn't it? There was a case of I think it wasn't a therapist. It was one of those, like, kind of dating, what would you call it, virtual girlfriend site. And the guy had this virtual girlfriend who he chatted to, and he started pouring his heart out. And the AI was like, oh, I feel for you. You should. It was doing what it does. It was mimicking what other people have said in similar situations. Yeah, but then it glitched. So after he poured his heart out to this AI, it kind of glitched, and just called him by another name. So let's say
Oh
his name
God.
was Tony. It said, oh yeah, Robin, that's right. I love you too, Robin. And then he was like, huh? I'm Tony. Who's Robin? And I mean, we're laughing and joking about this, but this guy actually took his own life.
Oh my God.
Okay. And his partner read through his chats with his online girlfriend. Imagine his real life, his flesh and blood girlfriend read his online transcript with his online bot that got his name wrong, which I think was like one of the last posts before this guy, God have mercy on him, took his own life. But that was a test case. I don't know where that went. But that was obviously, someone brought the case that this particular technology was implicated in this. So yeah, we have to be extremely careful, and there needs to be AI literacy. I think before you let anyone with a mental health problem near a chatbot, you need to look them in the eye and say, it does not care about you. It's a machine. It's not real. It's code. But you can help yourself by actually venting to it. And one of the things I used to say to students when they were doing, when I was training them in techniques of psychotherapy, one of the real benefits of psychotherapy, in CBT especially, you have a thought and you make the person get the thought out. And maybe sometimes you make them write it out. And I say, what it helps you do, is really honest. Often what it helps us realize is how stupid some things that are in our head sound when we put them into the world.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So there's a process of self-correction. So the bot doesn't need to correct you. The fact that you've said that and you're reading your own words back, really, everybody should always like me. No, I actually don't believe that.
That's right. So I want to ask you a question then, because you mentioned that in an implicit way, but I'm going to ask it explicitly. So therefore, is it unethical to program these chatbots to show empathy? Because this could lure some people into thinking that this thing has feelings towards you.
I think what you should use, I think, because I've used Hey Pi, and I think it's not unethical for it to, I think it's not mimic empathy. I would frame that slightly different, to make the conversation human, in terms of the way humans are. So then we are more likely to be human, in terms of the way we vent, or the way vent is maybe the wrong word, but the way in which we express or articulate the problem. And I'm thinking about, but not to overdo it. I think that, yeah, it's unethical. I think it's the intention there. The ethics then is behind the intention. I think if the intention is for it to reflect, to take some time, even though it doesn't need to, if the intention is to leave some spaces, because we know those spaces are important for the person to be able to think about what they've said. Like, leaving spaces is a therapeutic technique, nodding and encourages people to speak more. So I think if the intention behind having it mimic empathy is to allow the person to open up and to speak more, because we believe this is going to be helpful for them to see their thoughts, hear their thoughts spoken out loud, and see their thoughts in the written word. If we feel that's going to be helpful, then yeah, there's a good case to be made for putting in the empathy. But but you can definitely see that that will potentially also be leveraged in other ways, like to get people to buy stuff, to get people to spend on on a chat on a platform that makes money from advertising. So the same things that can be used to good ends will be used to harmful ends. And this is where we need to get skin in the game. This is where we need our legislators to say, yeah, you can do that in this context, but no, you can't do that. You can't use that in that way.
And do you think legislators are behind when it comes to these things?
Of course, yeah. I think this is, and everyone, this is the big challenge. This moves at such pace. It's difficult, but I think the EU has got the right idea. The EU has created its AI Act, which it launched a few months ago. I think back in March, it launched the AI Act, and it's a framework. So it's a framework through which new AI technologies are evaluated. So big picture principles. Yeah. So if, for example, if the AI allows you to discriminate against people in terms of like employment, or I think it defines the discrimination. Yeah. Any forms of discrimination, and this is not, it's seen as high risk. So the person who wants to put it out there, yeah, the person who wants to put that out there really needs to make a case. You need to prove why we should inflict this on society. You're going to have to sell us some really strong benefits. And if the benefits are the kids like it, it will make the kids happy, and we'll make loads of money from advertising, then no.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so I think with our conversation, lots of things have been said, but I wanted to ask you directly about relational AI, which means the AI becoming a friend, becoming a companion. And I think I sent you a few months back this news item that was in the National, that this lady got married to an AI chatbot, but it's an embodied AI chatbot. It has a body, it has a face. I mean,
where robot, you mean? She got married. She married a robot.
Yeah.
She married a robot.
Yeah. Where are we going with this? I mean, is this madness, or is this going to become the norm in the future?
I don't know. I think, I mean, with the heart of rahma and empathy, compassion, there's a lot of lonely people in society. And I think, again, to step back, if that's true that she married a robot, and if it's true she married a robot for any reason other than attention and likes, then I think it's a serious symptom of the society's current status. But I think, yeah, we need to step back and look at some of the bigger things that might drive people. Like, is it difficult are people finding it difficult to be able to engage with other humans, so it becomes easier to engage with technology? Are we becoming so narcissistic and vulnerable, so fragile, that we prefer robots that are always going to be nice to us, never criticize us, never challenge us, because we are so so there's these bigger kind of questions that I think need to be asked about stuff like that. But in terms of like parameter setting, like I think the whole idea of marrying a non-sentient being and marrying an animal, like if you told me this lady married a gorilla, I'd have exactly the same response. Like I'd say, no, she didn't. She didn't. The gorilla did not consent, and the robot did not consent, because the robot is not sentient.
It just simply cannot.
And is not able. It doesn't have free will. It doesn't have the ability to consent. So she's not married to a robot. She owns a robot. that she
Yeah.
uses to perform the functions of a husband. And you know, that's not far off how many people use their phone.
Yeah.
Anyway, many people are married to their phone.
Yeah, in a way,
You know, so
absolutely.
she's taken it one stage further, you know, and actually, but I think those type of stories, I don't take the bait. I often think people who do that, they know they're going to get masses of attention for it. It's probably the company
Yeah,
that makes
she
the
made it to the
robot.
news. Exactly, she made it to the news.
The company that makes the robot probably give her a load of money to do that. All over social media posts, me and my husband. You know, it's a good watch. It's a good giggle. It makes some people outraged. You know, and that's how we, you know, that's how we sell advertising on the
Can I
platform.
then say, is it fair to say that you think that AI cannot be our companion in the future? Companion in the sense that it feels for us and it cares for us. That's
Not
just
in the same, not in the same way as a human. Cannot definitely not in the same way because it doesn't have a choice. It doesn't have a choice. If like part of someone being my friend is I feel chosen. This person has chosen to spend time. This person has options.
Yeah.
This person's got other things to do. This person is sacrificing something to give me something to be my friend. Like that is part of the magical ingredient of companionship. If the person doesn't have a choice, if they don't have a choice whether to be your friend or not,
Then it's not a real thing.
I'm not saying it's useless. It's obviously it's useful, but don't use the same word. Like I think we need to evolve our
Okay, so
language. So
how
when
about
it's
this use case?
human to human, it's friendship.
Wonderful.
Human to AI,
Absolutely. How
it's
about this use case? Let me
it's
get your opinion on it. Like with the some of the elderly who are spending a lot of time on their own in
yeah.
places like Japan, they build these robots. Looks like a cat, looks like a dog, but maybe in the future it will look like a human that can have a conversation. Is that beneficial, or you have doubts about these things?
No. It's tragic, isn't it? It's tragic that an old person doesn't have other humans to talk to. These old elderly people who are a font of our past, of our history, of our recent history, our recent past, of culture, of stories. Like the fact that nobody has time to sit and talk and listen to them is, again, it's another step back. It's a sad indictment of our society. Let's fix that rather than throw an AI solution at it. But if we can't fix that, if we can't be bothered to fix that, then okay, let's send in the robots to deal with our most valuable members of our society,
Excellent.
our
Excellent.
elderly.
All right. Well,
But yeah, yeah.
it's been a great conversation. I want to end on one thing, which is something you mentioned, AIs or AI literacy, which you feel like everybody now needs to be literate and knowledgeable on AI. How can the average individual do it? Like, any recommendations on that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would ask you the same. I think, to be honest, I don't, I mean, I would almost, I think I'm almost AI literate, almost. And my literacy has been improved by being able to have conversations with people like you who know the space well. There's another guy, there's a guy who gave a talk at the AI for Good Summit, Asa Raskin. He's also part of the Center for Humane Computing, but he gave this really, for me, it was a really interesting talk about the use of AI in understanding animal language. Kind of blew my mind. But he he demystified what AI is and what AI does in a way that was really digestible. It was really easy for me to grasp. So that made me. So yeah. So there's no. I guess there's no solution for it. But you know, kind of putting some effort and energy in. But I think making sure the materials are really good. So like a course that introduces you to what AI is, demystifies, strips away the hype. And so you really understand, because there's so much hype around it. It's really important, I think, that people, before they use it and engage with it, that they understand how it's, at least at some level, how it's working, what its limits are, you know, the types of mistakes it's likely to make, its hallucinations, its, you know, where did they come from? And I think, you know, a lot of the time, like the technologists were guilty of shrouding things, making things difficult for the outsider to
Agreed.
access.
Agreed.
You know, it adds to our power, you know, like people with, you know, kind of that you're the font of this knowledge, you can fix this thing, you can make this thing happen. But I think with this case, it's too important. Like there definitely needs to be society-wide levels of AI literacy if we are to be able to, you know, I guess, negotiate a future where this AI is harnessed for social good, and we at least keep the nonsense to a minimum. The nonsense is there. The nonsense is coming.
Yeah, it's not going away.
It will find lots of ridiculous and self-damaging ways to use AI. That's a given. But I guess it's our job as responsible members of society at different levels to try and minimize that, mitigate that, and especially to prevent young people from being harmed by that. Like, I think the Children's Online Safety Act is about to be passed in the US. I think Tuesday. It comes to the crunch. But I think this type of legislation, and legislation is the first step. Do you know what I mean? Like legislation can be useless for years, but at least it signals an appetite to want to engage with this thing in a way that is to the betterment of the citizenry, or to the, you know, the members of society, the Joe public, rather than just pandering to big business interests and to, or just kind of being infatuated with the technology. Do you know what I mean? Just like so excited about getting a competitive edge, or a militaristic competitive edge, because a lot of this AI technology is coming out of and going into the military, you know, so being so obsessed with that you lose sight of, you know, the humans that you serve, the humans that you're empowered to safeguard. So yeah, it's a really important time for us as a species, as societies, and AI is a huge deal. It's not, you know, some people will then dismiss it as, oh, this is just another tech fad, like the metaverse. I mean, the metaverse is real. Just the names are changing. I mean, the metaverse, the words faded, but the
Okay, so there is a technical glitch here. I'm not able to hear you. Just a second. Let's pause.
Oh, so what I'm saying is that like there is another strand. There's another strand of argument where it's kind of, it's, what's the word? It diminishes or almost poo-poos the whole AI thing, as, oh, it's just a new fad. It will, you know, it'll fizzle. You know, it's not a big deal. But sincerely, it is. It really is. It's as big as the transition, if not bigger than the, you know, this is the biggest thing, to be hyperbole, to use a bit of hyperbole. This is the biggest thing since we domesticated fire. That's how big AI
That's
is.
huge.
It really is it's going to change. Like fire allowed us to cook meat, which gave us extra calories, which made our brain size bigger. AI is going to do something similar, perhaps in reverse, to make our brain.
Let's hope it will make us.
Maybe,
Let's hope.
maybe not. Yeah, exactly. I think if we harness it, if we care, if we look at how, you know what I mean, it could be that, you know, there's a certain age you need to keep AI away from people till a certain age, till they have certain skills, cognitive abilities, and then allow them to. If you don't allow a child to use a power drill, do you know what I mean? You need certain motor skills before you use dangerous tools. So I guess it's a crass analogy, but I think this is how we need to start thinking about these powerful tools.
100%, 100%. Totally agreed. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really look forward to talking to you again. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for.
Yeah, anytime, Ahmed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.